I am a E-UNI graduate. I've been playing this game for about a little over a year now, and I've been in the uni for most of that. I am a dedicated drone user. Drones are my primary weapon system. I like to fly around in HTARs and shoot things. And a member of the WHC, and one of the teachers. Hoping to get professor eventually, but that's a ways off. And this class is going to be about mainly the use of dedicated drone boats and drone tactics. So this is not about my Hurricane has a 30-meter drone bay, and what drones should I put in there? This is about I'm fairly familiar with drones, or I was just in the last class, and I want to know how to use them as a primary weapon system as opposed to things like lasers or turrets. We're going to be talking about drone boats, fitting those drone boats. We're going to be talking about some of the modules, things like implants and things that help improve your drone skills, as well as tactics for using drones in both PvE and PvP. I'm expecting this class to run about an hour, but like the last one, it may go a little bit over that, and I will, once it's done, just have a general Q&A, both for this one and the last one, because the Q&A did get cut a little bit shorter than the last one, so I'll just be open for any drone questions at the end. This class does not have a slideshow like the last one. I'm kind of just doing this from the top of my head. I'm following the syllabus a little bit. I'll post that link if you want to read the syllabus while I'm just using it as an outline for the most part. Let me get that for you. There's the syllabus if you want to follow along there. And I'll try and provide you guys with a couple fittings for the drone boats too. I'm going to go over basically all of the drone boats from the Tech 1 frigates up to the capital ships, and give you kind of some of the general fitting ideas and uses and problems with all of them. And you should see some trends by the end of it that hopefully will help you fit your own stuff later on. But let's go ahead and get started. The first thing I want to talk about, because I didn't really cover, So let me just ask you guys a question. I went over them briefly in the last class. I could talk about them more depending on if you guys want me to. Is the advanced drones. So that's the E-war drones, logistic drones, fighter and fighter bombers. I'll talk about the fighters and fighter bombers more later, but do you guys want to hear more about those, or would you rather me just kind of get to the drone boats themselves? Please put an X if you want me to talk more about those drones, and a Y if you would rather I just get to the drone boats. Okay, that's the vast majority of get to the drone boats. Okay. Okay, so drone boats in EVE are ships that are bonused for the use of drones as a primary weapon system. They're usually not bonused for any type of turret or missiles. They have large drone bays. They have large bandwidth compared to ships of their similar size. And they're generally, just meant for using lots of different types of drones. Most drone boats are Galente. So if you're interested in using drones, you want to be probably a Galente pilot. Although there are also some Amar ships that are drone boats as well, most notably the Prophecy and the Armageddon, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Before I continue again, could I have somebody who is willing to link things for me in chat while I talk? Silix, I assume you can keep doing that? Cool.
Yeah, it's going to be the guy Silix. He loaded into a carrier because he wants to show it off.
So I'm going to talk first about, let's talk about fitting a little bit. There are some, actually, do you guys still have that slideshow open? It did have a slide about modules. I'll use to talk about it. Do you guys want me to relink that, or do you still have it open? I'll just relink it anyways. Let me get there real quick.
Hey, for those of us just came, you're in lecture.E-UNI, right? E-UNI, right?
Yes.
Yep.
So let's link it too, I think. Good. Thank you guys for linking that. If you go, let me figure out which slide.
Okay, how do you get to that?
You should be able to open it, if you click on one of the links, you should be able to open it in the in-game browser. If not, it will definitely open out of game.
If you want to open it out of game, just right-click, say copy URL, then go to your second screen.
I've only got, chat E-UNI. I haven't got that up yet, so is that again go to the little open channel window?
Yeah, the little chat bubble. Yeah, the little chat bubble. Click on that, and then in the thing, you just type lecture.e-uni, and you hit join, and then you'll be all right.
Yep. Let me know when you do that. I'll post a link again.
I'm in.
Okay, can actually somebody post that? I have to reopen it. But it's slide 15. There should be a slide about drone modules. Let's look at that for a second. These are the different modules that you can use to help increase your ship's drone skills. More than just your ship's drone capability more than just your skills. So let's talk about them and what they do before I talk about fitting, so you know what modules I'm talking about. Like I said, this is slide 15 on that slideshow that hopefully everybody has open now.
Could you repost that? I don't have that on the lecture E-UNI. Sorry, bit behind. Thank you.
Could someone do that, please?
Thank you, Jeff.
Cool. So, just a second. Just a minute, guys. Okay, so you'll notice that there's 4 modules that are used mainly, and the drone control unit, which we'll also talk about, that are used to increase a ship's drone capability. There is the drone damage amplifier, which is a low slot module, and much like the gyro stabilizer or the magnetic field stabilizer, heatsink, ballistic control system, the drone damage amplifier gives you a bonus to your drone's DPS. It's 68% for the Tech 1 variant, and it is 23% for the Tech 2 variant. And this module is affected by, I believe it's just weapon upgrades is what is required to fit that module. And it's, like all the modules, it's affected by stacking penalties. We're on slide 15 of Bale. It's called Drone Modules. And it's pretty much a good module to have on any drone ship that has a low sort. It's what you would expect. The only problem with the drone damage amplifier is that almost every drone boat is a armor boat, Galente or Omar, and so this does conflict with tanking modules. You have to find a right balance between tank and damage, which I will talk about as I talk about different fittings. The next module is a high slot module. It is the Drone Link Augmenter. For each one of these you fit, you get you get an additional 20 kilometers on your drone control range, and I don't believe that's stacking penalized. The Tech 2 version has a 24 kilometer bonus, so that's good, especially on sniping boats. Drone boats are meant to be used with sentries. It's an excellent module. You see that a lot on things like Dominix's and sometimes Ishtars, and maybe Archons as well. The third module is the Drone Navigation Computer. It is a mid-slot module, and what it does is it increases the micro-warp drive speed of your drones. If you remember from the first class, what that means is that it increases the speed that your drone travels between you and your target. It does not increase the speed that the drone orbits you or your target. And it's also important to note that the module is not percentage-based. It adds a absolute value of 25 newtons or for the Tech 1 or 30 newtons for the Tech 2 thrust to all of your drones. So this module has a much higher effect on small drones, such as light scout drones, than it does on large drones, such as ogres. So this would be something good to use with maybe a Vexor or a Tristan, where you're mainly using small drones. It would probably be a waste on something like a Dominix, where you're going to be using either sentries or ogres, because it's just not going to have as big of an effect. Just a second. The Drone Link Augmenter requires, I believe, drone sharpshooting? No, I'm sorry. Let me look it up real quick. Did we have somebody who could link that stuff? I know somebody said they were doing it. Thank you. Yeah. So the drone link augmenter, which is the one that increases the drone range, requires combat drone operation 1 for the Tech 1 variant and combat drone operation 4 for the Tech 2 variant. The drone damage amplifier, as I said, requires weapon upgrades. The drone navigation computer requires drone navigation 1 for the Tech 1 variant and drone navigation 5 for the Tech 2 variant. And the next module, the omnidirectional tracking link, has actually been changed since this slideshow was made. Previous to the last update, the omnidirectional tracking link gave you a 20% bonus to optimal range and tracking speed, and it was a passive module. That is not true anymore. The omnidirectional tracking link now, the Tech 1 variant, now gives you it is an active module. You have to turn it on. It requires a little bit of capacitor. And you can script it. It gives you a 15% bonus to those. It gives you a 15% bonus to optimum range and tracking speed. You can script it now, just like you might script a tracking computer for one or the other, which will double the bonus of one and remove the bonus of the other. So you can get either 30 to optimal range or 30 to tracking speed. This was intended to be a nerf to the module. It's actually made it a lot better, in my opinion, because now instead of having two 20% modules, which are stacking penalized, you can script the modules to have a 30% bonus to. You can have two of these modules on and have them each scripted differently, so that there's a 30% bonus to both optimal range and tracking speed, which will not be penalized because different stats are being affected. If that makes sense to you guys. I haven't talked much about stacking penalties. I'm assuming you guys are at least familiar with the concept. Is that true? Do you guys need me to explain how stacking penalties work? X if you do. And I will all explain it briefly, but I'm assuming that you guys kind of understand what I'm talking about. Nico asked, I guess, so Nico, if you fit any module, this does not just apply to these, if you fit any module that affects, more than one module that affects the same statistic on your ship, so if modules that might affect, for example, your electromagnetic armor resistance, or your shield resistance, or the amount of tracking bonus you get, there is a stacking penalty for those modules, which means that the second most powerful module will only be 87% as effective as the first module, and so on and so on. So the more modules you put that affect the same stat, the more each one will be penalized. Up until the fourth module only works at about 10% effectiveness as the first one. Fifth module, yeah. And Silic just posted the stacking penalties. So originally the omnidirectional tracking link gave you a 20% bonus to each, but it was stacking penalized. Now it's still stacking penalized technically, but you can script it so that you get 30% from one and 30% from the other. And since it's different stats affected, it's not penalized. It works better. You do have to turn them on, but big deal. It doesn't take up that much. And the last module here, which is a capital module, it fits on the Archon and the or carriers or the super carriers, is the drone control unit. It's meant to be fit on the capital ships, and what it does is for each drone control unit fit by slot module, it allows those ships to have one extra drone under their control. So, for example, the Archon can have a base of 10 drones without any of these. If it had 5 of these in its high slots, it could be controlling up to 15 drones at once. And it does not matter what those drones are. They could be scout drones, they could be fighters or fighter bombers, which we'll talk about those when I get to the capital ships. And those are the drone modules. There are also drone rigs. I'm just going to go ahead and say the drone rigs kind of suck. I've seen fits that put them, but I would not use them personally. There's better things that you could put, such as armor rigs, unless you're in a very specific ship, which is class is intended to kind of cover the generals. Go ahead and leave the slideshow open, but you guys can minimize it if you want. I'm just going to talk about the drone boat specifically now, and we'll come back to the last couple slides in a bit. So now that you guys have kind of seen the modules, let's talk about drone boats specifically. So we'll start with frigates. There are there are really only 2 frigate drone boats, and those are the Galente ones. The first, the Tech 1 variant, is the Tristan, if somebody could link that. And the Tech 2 variant is the Ishkur, which is not to be confused with the Ishtar, which is a heavy assault cruiser. The Tristan is kind of the first drone boat that anybody interested in drones can fly. You'll notice if you click on the link that Silic's posted, it has a small drone bonus. This bonus is it's got a 10% bonus to drone hit points and tracking speed. So it doesn't increase damage, but it does increase how much damage the drones themselves can take. Because remember, drones can be shot, drones can be destroyed. But it increases the tracking speed, so what type of targets they can shoot, and how much damage they can take. And it also, unlike most frigates, if you go to the attributes tab of the Tristan, you'll notice that it has a 25 megabit bandwidth, so it can field a full flight of light drones, as well as a 40 meters cubed capacity. This ship can hold up to 8 light drones, as opposed to most frigates, which almost every other frigate can hold at most 2 drones, and can only field 2 drones. This ship can hold 8, and it can launch 5. And while those drones are not bonused in damage, their DPS is not bonused. They do have bonuses to tracking speed, which is rather important. So the Tristan is the first ship, and it's actually an excellent ship for solo PvP, especially if you're interested in kind of just stepping in the waters, but you don't want to risk something too expensive of PvP. You can often take a Tristan out into LowSec and get some good fights, you get some good practice with it, because it's not too expensive, but it's fairly combat effective. Especially if you're fighting other frigates, you can do a good job of kiting ships around in the Tristan. So what that means is that you would, for example, put in something like warriors, which are very fast. The warrior drones are fast. And you would fit up the Tristan for shield in this case. Galente boats are usually armor ships, but the Tristan is actually an excellent shield ship, because that doesn't take away from its speed. So you could put a shield tank on it. It's usually just a buffer tank. You can put some drones in it. You can put a micro warp drive on it. And because your drone control range, remember, if your drone control range skills are trained well, you can have up to 60 kilometers drone control range, which means your Tristan, even though it's a frigate, can be 60 kilometers away from a enemy frigate, hypothetically, and you can still be attacking it with your drones, while that ship, especially if it's a frigate, can't even hit you. It's not even close to being able to hit you. And that gives you a lot of opportunities. You can also use the Tristan as a brawling ship. You can put an armor tank on it, and put blasters in the high slots, because you have free high slots in most drone boats, and use it that way. Let me see if I have any Tristan fits. I might have an Ishkur fit. I'm not sure about Tristan. Oh, I do. Excellent. Let me post this link for you guys real quick. So that is an example of let's see. So this is a shield trip. This is kind of what I was just talking about. This is meant for kite. And you will see, just a second. So you'll see a couple things here. Let's look at the low powers first. You see a micro auxiliary power core, which is kind of just a requirement for a lot of frigate fits. Most frigates are a little low on power grid. This is not something that's specific to Tristan or drone boats. It's just so you can fit the medium shield module, essentially. So you have that. The other low slot, you see a drone damage amplifier, which gives you that nice bonus for your drone damage, and a nanofiber internal structure, which decreases the ship's armor. I believe it's armor or hull. Hull strength, but it increases its maneuverability a lot. It makes it a lot faster. This is a kiting ship, so you kind of want to be faster than your enemy. So that's the low slots. In the medium slots, you see the shield module. That's just a faction version of a medium shield extender. which is intended to provide a buffer. You're hoping not to get shot a whole lot anyways, so you're hoping that you're going to be farther away from your enemy than they can shoot you. So a buffer shield is fine. It doesn't matter that the shield gives you an extra signature radius because you're out of their range. So you see the shield, you see the micro warp drive, which lets you keep up speed, and you see the warp disruptor because you have to keep them pointed. In the drone bay, somebody asked why there are only 3 hobgoblins. That's because there happen to be only 3 in this ship when I save this fitting. You should have a full drone bay worth of hobgoblins or warriors. It's your choice. But you would have a full drone bay full of essentially some type of light scout drone, hobgoblins or warriors. And then in the high power slot, you see you can put whatever you want in the highs. I put 2 long-range guns, which are probably not that useful, to be honest, but you can put whatever you want. And a smart bomb. And the reason for the smart bomb is if the enemy has drones, I can turn on the smart bomb and get rid of them while my drones can still be effective against theirs. Warriors are actually, somebody was saying, warriors are actually probably a better choice. This ship just happened to have hobgoblins when I saved this fitting. If you're intending to be solo fighting, like you're doing this on your own and you're just attacking frigates, warriors are probably better because they have, like I said earlier, they have a faster speed, and they can keep up with frigates, which are very fast to start with. And hobgoblins may not be able to keep up with some of the faster frigates, while warriors will be able to do that. Somebody asks, so in that solo Tristan, would you be orbiting around 200? Okay, no. So the point of this ship, the point of this particular fit, is to keep range from the enemy. Most of the take comes from the fact that you can stay out of range. You can stay out of a frigate's range very easily because you have a large drone control range. So you want to orbit them or keep distance from them at around 20, a little under 20 kilometers, which is the range of your faint warp disruptor. You want to be just inside the range where you can point them, but far enough away that they can't shoot you effectively. So you want to orbit around 20, maybe somewhere between 15 and 20. That's out of the range of most frigates. And that's an example of a Tristan fit. Like I said, you can also fit it for armor brawling, but I don't have an armor brawling fit saved, so you can make comparisons to some of the later brawling fits I'll show you. Evangeline have a fit saved, it looks like.
Yes, I think I've got another one in here I've picked up from somewhere else. I'm just not sure where. I'll put that in as well. It's just something someone else has no doubt given me.
Yeah, I don't want to... Evangeline's fit isn't... Yeah, I don't want to talk too much about other people's fits because I haven't had time to look them over, but you can look at... If people are posting some stuff, you can look at those. But that's the Tristan. It's mainly good for... it's good for solo PvP. You could also do small gang PvP in the Tristan because, you got 5 people, 25 drones can kill quite a lot of things. And you also have spider taking options, which I'll talk about when I get to the Vexor. But it's a good ship to start with. It can hold those you can launch those 5 light scout drones, which is actually quite a bit of DPS. If you're well skilled, you can do about 200 DPS with that, which is enough to break most frigate tanks, especially if you can kite them around for long enough for their cap to dry out. So the Tech 2 variant of the Tristan is the Ishkur. The Ishkur is a assault frigate, and it is one of the best assault frigates in my opinion, although I am, of course, biased because I love drones. Let me see if I have an Ishkur saved. I thought I did, but apparently... Yeah, no, I don't. I apologize for that. The Ishkur is the Tech 2 variant of the Tristan. If somebody could link that, please. I'll get it. There we go. The Ishkur is the Tech 2 variant of the Tristan. If you go ahead and look at one of the links, you'll notice that unlike the Tristan, the Ishkur definitely has a lot better bonuses. It gets separate bonuses from both the Galente frigate skill and the assault frigate skill. there's still no damage bonus to the drones, which is what you expect from the frigates. But it does have a hybrid turret damage, and it has a bonus to not only drone hit points, but drone bay capacity. So you can hold quite a few more drones in the Ishcore, which is excellent because often when you're fighting, especially on the solo level, people will try and attack your drones. And you need to have drones to be able. You need to have that extra capacity to be able to continually replace their drones as they're getting killed, which is kind of a tactic we'll talk about in a bit. So yeah, the Ishcore can be fit quite similar to the Tristan, actually. I've seen shield fits, which is pretty much identical to the Tristan I showed you, and I've also seen good fits with ancillary shield boosters or ancillary armor boosters, which run on either cap booster cap booster charges or nano repair pace charges instead of capacitor. Which and basically you do the same thing in the Ishcore you do as the Tristan, it's just a little bit better. You kite people and you shoot them and they die. It's a great ship. I'm looking, let me see if I have an Ishcore saved around my cargo base somewhere. I don't think so, but let me just check. I do want to show you guys the fit if I can find one.
Unfortunately, I can't fly one. I've only been flying for probably just over 2 months.
Yeah, it doesn't look like there's any in my hangar array. Okay, but that's the frigates. The frigates are fairly simple. You just kind of want to put a buffer tank on them for the most part. They're good for practice. The Tristan, to give you guys a skill idea, the Tristan only requires Galente frigates, which is, Galente frigate 1. You pretty much come with it if you're a Galente pilot. The Ishcore is a bit more complicated. It's an assault frigate, so it requires, on top of Galente frigate 5, it requires Mechanics 5, Power Grid Management 5, Spaceship Command 3, which I believe you come with Spaceship Command 3, and Assault Frigates 1. But it's definitely worth training if you're going to be a drone pilot. It's cheap, relatively speaking. It costs about $20 million for the ship, $30 million once it's fully fitted. So it's a good ship to get out there and practice PvP in, or to just kill other frigates, and you can kill cruisers. I've seen an Ishcore kill cruisers more often than not. But the general tactic with with either the Tristan or the Ishcore is to keep range. You fit something like a shield, which doesn't decrease your speed. You keep range, and you let your light drones destroy something while you are out of range of the guns. Any questions about those two ships? I have quite a bit more to talk about on the other ships, but I want to go over the frigates kind of quickly. Is there any questions about those two ships? And for the new people, you can go ahead and ask questions and mumble once I ask for them. It's fine. No, I'm afraid I can't give you one, but once you have Ishcore's trained, they're fairly cheap once you're at that level. Like I said, they're about $30 million, so that's cheaper than a Vexor hull. All right. So there's no really MR equivalent for the frigate drone boats or destroyers. So the first levels are pretty much purely Galente. The destroyer version, there is a destroyer drone boat, although it kind of tends to get overlooked, which is the Algos, and I guess there's the Dragoon too. Yeah. I deal mostly with cruisers at this point, so I'm getting a little rusty on the smaller ones, but yeah. So there's the Algos and the Dragoon, which are both destroyers, and they're the drone boats of the destroyers. The Algos is the one I see used the most. You'll notice that it has the drone bonus to the 10% bonus to drone hit points and damage. This is pretty much the typical bonus of all the drone boats, starting here and all the way up. They all have a 10% bonus to drone hit points and damage. And you'll notice that the Dragoon has the same bonus. The Algos also has a bonus to hybrid turret tracking speed. And while the Dragoon has a bonus to energy vampires and energy neutralizers. And they both have a bonus, since they're destroyers. They have a roll bonus of increasing drone velocity, so that's increasing the speed with which your drones get to the ship. Let me see if I have an Algos fit. No destroyer fits. Okay. The Algos, I've used the Algos. I like it. It suffers from the same kind of problems as other destroyers, in that it's got a bigger hull than frigates, but it doesn't really have any better of a tank, so they're very easy to kill. It puts out a lot of DPS, but it's also very easy to kill. You'll notice that if you look at the Algos' drone bay and drone capacity, it has enough to carry a full flight of medium drones if it wants to. It takes 50 meters cubed to carry a full flight of medium drones, so it has that, as well as a couple light drones. And the same thing with the bandwidth. It has 35 megabits bandwidth, and what you typically see with the Algos is what's referred to as a mixed flight of drones. Because it's a destroyer, you want to maximize your DPS as much as possible. So what you typically see is people launching 2 hammerheads and 3 hobgoblins. That's 2 medium drones and 3 light drones, which perfectly fits that 35 megabit bandwidth and gives you a little extra DPS as opposed to 5 hobgoblins. The Algos would typically be armor tanked, so the low slots, let me see what it has. So it's got 3 low slots, so you would put something like a damage control, maybe a energized adaptive nanomembrane, and then a drone damage amplifier is what you might put in the lows. Where the medium slots, afterburner, pointer, web, and maybe, a pointer scram and a web. And the high slots, you would, the Algos actually has a bonus to small hybrid turrets, so you would probably put blasters in the high slots. The Algos, unlike the Triss and the Algos, is primarily a brawling drone boat. It's meant to kill things up close. So you would fit the armor tank because it's a little bit better than shield as far as just pure DPS, and it doesn't matter if you're up close. You would use the 2 hammerheads and the 3 hobgoblins along with a full set of light blasters. I believe it can fit 6. Yeah, 6 light blasters. And you would just hammer away people. You could probably do up to 400 DPS in a properly fit out. It can put out quite a lot of damage. It's not bad for solo. It's better, in my opinion, than the other drone boats, than the other destroyers, I apologize. But you still do have to worry about that fact that their destroyers are rather easy to kill. The Dragoon, I don't see the Dragoon being used a lot. You would probably do something similar with it, except that the high slots would be newts instead of guns, which is actually fairly common with drone boats, especially MR drone boats. And that can be quite useful because it allows you, if you, even though it can't put out as much DPS as something like the Algos, it can cap out enemy, which means if they're active tank, their tank fails. It doesn't matter what your DPS is because they can't take it.
Just to let you know, I did link a Dragoon fit I had that I've gotten off someone somewhere in lecture.
Yeah, let's see. Yeah, that's actually a fairly good Dragoon fit if you guys look at what Evangeline posted. In the low slots you see damage control. The nanoplating, I'm not sure if I put plating. I'd try and put maybe energized adaptive nanomembrane. It depends on how much capacitor it has. I haven't actually looked at this fit in Pytha. But the nanoplating is a good option if you cannot fit a full ENAM. And it's got a plate and drone damage amplifier, so that's really good for the lows. You'll notice that the rig slots are armor rigs, which makes sense, and 1 current router. Drone ships, especially Galantish, this is an MR. Drone ships tend to have trouble with fitting both more in CPU, but you also have power grid, so I could see the ancillary current router. And then medium slots are what you'd expect. You got a micro warp drive and you got a warp scrambler. The scrambler, you would have a scrambler instead of a disruptor because it's a brawling boat. It's meant to be up close. And in the high slots, you see some lasers, which are fine, and also some newts. You could also have a full slot of newts in the highs. It's just kind of personal preference, but it's a good Dragoon fit. And you'll see in Drum Bay as hobgoblins and warriors. I would probably have hobgoblins and hammerheads, but that's a personal choice depending on who made the fit, whether to go with all light drones or whether to go with that mixed flight for extra DPS.
Well, most of these fits I'm linking, unless they've got a separate name from the ship, are not mine. They're just ones I've picked up from people linking them, and I've saved them for experiment for my own uses later.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, it's a pretty good fit. It's a good example of what you might put on something like a Dragoon. And yeah, that's that. So that's similar. And like I said, you would probably fit an Algos about the same way, with the exception being that the high slots would be all blasters. Edmund asks brawl with the Dragoon as opposed to kiting. Yes, you would definitely brawl. Especially with the Dragoon, because it's a newting ship. Newts don't have very long range, so if you're 20 kilometers off something, your newts are not going to be affected. It could only fit small newts, which have, I believe, a 6-kilometer range, so you need to be up close for that to be effective. Same thing with blasters. The Algos is mainly meant to fit blasters in its high slots, and you need to be up close. It's just generally better in those cases. The frigates have the option of kiting because they have the really big speed advantage, but not so much in the destroyers. Any other general questions about the destroyers? There are unfortunately no Tech 2 destroyer drone boats, but then you get the interceptors. So interdictors, not interceptors. Any questions about those? Okay. This class is probably going to take a little bit longer than I expected, but I'm okay with that. So let's move to the cruisers now. The cruisers are the fun drone boats, in my opinion. There are quite a few different cruisers. I'll talk about the Galente ones first. The first is the Vexor. The Vexor is kind of the first real drone boat that people start using. The Amar also has one. I believe it's the Arbitrator. I may be wrong.
That's correct.
Yes, the Arbitrator. But let's talk about the Vexor, and the kind of the same thing as go over to the Arbitrator. The Vexor, if you look at it, has that bonus that I said is going to keep popping up, the 10% bonus to damage and hit points. It also has Mine Yield, which is stupid. It's kind of a leftover from when they first made these boats. So it's got the basic damage. It has a 125 meter cube drone capacity drone bay. So it could technically fit a full flight of heavy center drones, but you'll notice that it only has a 75 megabit bandwidth. So that's not necessarily the best idea. Even if it could field it, you would be leaving yourself vulnerable by not having a flight of lights and heavies. So typically what you would have in the Vexor with that drone bay is you would have a flight of light drones, which is going to take up 25, a flight of medium drones, which is going to take up 50, and then you have another 50 to play with. I would probably put a flight of E-War drones in case you get pointed and need to bounce somewhere before you die. But you could put what you want in there. I should have a Vexor fit. Okay, something is seriously wrong with me because I don't have Vexor fits. I apologize because I thought I had a lot more fits than I did. Let me pull one from Piper real quick. I know I have one saved.
That's one I got sitting in my collection for some reason. Don't know what it's like though.
Yep, that's good. I do apologize. I could have sworn I had a lot of these saved for this thing. I made them for a class earlier, but it appears they're mostly the battle cruisers and battleships, but Lake 2. So the fit that Evangeline posted is actually the first one is a pretty good one, and that's what you would typically see in a Vexor. The low slots, the Vexor is an armor ship. You can shield tank it, but not as effectively as some of the other drone boats. But it's an armor ship. So you see in the low slots, you see what's a fairly typical armor tank. You see a damage control. You see an energized nanomembrane, although those should probably be Tech 2s. And then you see a steel plate. This is a buffer tank. You could also replace the plate with, some type of repair module. I'm not going to talk too much about that because, armor tank is a different class. And then you see the drone damage amplifier and whatever's left over. Same thing with the rigs. Rigs are armor rigs. The medium slots, pretty typical. High slots, you can have The Vexor actually is bonused for hybrid guns, which is fairly rare. Most of the drone boats don't have a gun bonus. But in this case, you would put hybrid turrets on the Vexor. And then in the drone bay, I actually don't like it much. I would have 5 hobgoblins, 5 hammerheads, and then I would have 5. If you're mission running, the salvage drones make sense. If not, I'd probably have 5 ECM drones for PvP, because you never know when you need to escape, like I said. The Vexor is mostly a brawling ship, just like the destroyers. You want to get up close to whoever you're fighting and launch your hobgoblins on top of them and keep them scrammed with the scram that you have on that ship. Scrammed and webbed. And then you can also use your blasters to kill them. The Galente also has a faction cruiser called the Vexor Navy Issue, which is an excellent ship, especially for mission running. The Vexor Navy Issue is the...
I just posted it in.
Yeah. Navy variant of the Vexor. I don't think that's not the right one.
I just linked it, the Aegis.
There we go. Vexor Navy Issue. Which has, same bonus. It has a bonus to drone velocity and tracking, which means they're faster. But the big thing with this one is if you go to attributes, you notice it has a bandwidth of 125 megabits per second, which means this ship can field a full flight of heavy or sentry drones, which makes it very popular for mission running because even though it's a cruiser, it can field 5 sentry drones, which means you can put you can put up to 800 DPS with this cruiser, this Tech 1 cruiser ship. It's faction, but it's still Tech 1. And it has a drone bay that can hold that, right? It has a 200 meter cube drone bay, so you can hold 1 flight of lights, 1 flight of mediums, and 1 flight of heavies. Other than that, you would fit it pretty much the same as the Vexor. You'd have armor in the lows, armor in the rigs. In the medium slots, you would put point and, propulsion for PvP, or you could put propulsion in cap for some type of PvE. High slots could be whatever you want. The Vexor Navy Issue, unlike the Vexor, is not bonus for guns, so you could put whatever type of gun you want. Lasers, projectiles, doesn't really matter. And I do have a Vexor Navy Issue fit, so let me post that for you. Here's the PvP fit for the Vexor. You'll notice the low slots. You got damage control. You have nano plating. It is a little low on CPU, so I chose to go with a faction nano plating instead of a energized adaptive nano membrane. It's pretty much the same, and that particular plating is fairly cheap. You have a second ENAM. You didn't have room for 2 of them. You have the plate, 2 drone damage amplifiers, armor rigs. The mediums, it has quite a few medium slots, so you have micro warp drive. You have all the typical PvP stuff. You'll notice the drone navigation computer. If you remember, I said that's mostly bonuses medium and light drones, so that makes sense in this case because most PvP is going to be medium and light drones. And then you got the highs. You'll notice the only really weird thing in the highs is the armor repairer, and that's to repair your own drones, which is a viable tactic in drone PvP. And I think I have one more for mission running. When I say point, I mean a scram or a disruptor, depending on if it's a tanking ship or a brawling ship. Usually it's a scram. And that is a PvE equivalent of the same thing. Notice the lows are pretty much the same. Everything's pretty much the same except for the mid slots. The mid slots, you see a sensor booster and the omnidirectional tracking links. This, unlike the PvP variant, is meant to be used with sentries. You warp in, you drop your sentries, and you let them kill things. So it has the omnidirectional tracking link, which increases sentries' range and tracking speed. It has the sensor booster, which increases your ship's locking range, because that also has to be acceptable. Afterburner to move around. In the high slots is artillery, because this is already a sniping boat, so you might as well put sniping guns in it. The final cruiser ship is the Ishtar. That's the Tech 2 variant. The Amar ships are, they're mostly the same. I'm just going to talk mainly about the Galente ones. The Amar ships are pretty much the same with the exception of they tend to have newts in the high slots instead of guns. So the Ishtar is the Tech 2 variant of the drone boats. It is a cruiser size. It is a heavy assault cruiser. On top of Galente Cruiser 5. It also requires quite a few other things. You can look at that list yourself in the window. I'm going to assume you guys know how to train Skylox because this is a 102 class. But the Ishtar is an excellent ship. In fact, it's one of the favorites in the metagame right now, along with the Dominix and the Archon. It has 5 different bonuses. It has a bonus to heavy drone velocity and tracking, which is excellent. That means that your heavy drones can get to places faster. They're not just spending all their time flying to a target. And they can also shoot things better. They can hit cruisers with the Ishtar, whereas they have trouble doing that in other ships. It has the drone damage and hit points bonus, which is already going to be, these first two are already going to be maxed out if you can fly it, because it requires going to Cruiser 5 to fly. And then for the heavy assault cruiser bonus, it gets a extra drone operating range. You can bring your operating range up to, let's see, that would be 60 plus 25, so 85. And a sentry drone range bonus, so that's also good for missions. As well as the macro warp drive signature radius penalty that all of the heavy assault cruisers get. I have several Ishtar fits. It's my favorite ship, so let me post them for you guys. This is an example of a shield Ishtar. The Ishtar can be armor tanked or shield tanked. And this is a shield Ishtar that I use for mission running. This is actually a passive tank, which we'll talk about. The Myrmidon is also excellent at this, and this is used, like I said, this is used for mission running. You go in, and you don't have to do anything essentially. A passive shield tank. I'm assuming that you guys know the basics of shield tanking. Basically regenerates itself over time. It does not require you to turn on any modules. The only really bad thing about it is it sucks up cap. You have to be careful about being cap stable. But this one is meant to be used as a sentry boat. So you warp in. This is actually for sleeper sites, although you can use it for level 4 missions. You have, in the medium slots, you have 2 shield extenders. You have an afterburner. You have a pretty typical passive shield tank in the mediums and the lows. And then the extra low slots are filled up with a drone damage amplifier. The high slots have autocannons because it's occasionally useful to kill things close to you. And also a newt because passive shield tanks have trouble with capacitor, and that helps in case you get neuted by NPCs. And then you'll notice that the main drone feature is the guard. It's the Galente sentry boat, the Galente sentry, and the Ishtar's bonus for it is good for killing things. Let me also post the ship I'm in right now, which is a PvP Ishtar. Here's a PvP Ishtar. This is a armor tank, unlike the last one. It's a buffer tank, so it's really meant to be used in fleet combat. But you could make it a active tank fairly easy by switching out the plate and the rigs for active tanking rigs. So in the mid slots, you see, pretty typical PvP stuff. You have the 2 omnidirectional links, which people tend to use the most with sentries, but they're also good for use with ogres, which are actually quite a bit more useful in PvP. Because they're more flexible as far as you moving around and getting to targets as opposed to being kind of stuck near your sentries. So the mid slots you see, it's got a propulsion, it's got a web, it's got a point, it's got a propulsion mod. It's got the 2 tracking links. You'll notice that most of the ships above the Ishtar have the 2 tracking links. The low slots is a pretty typical buffer armor tank plus the drone mods. Rig slots is the drone mods. And then the drones are what I typically use on all my Ishtars, as well as what you would use with something like a Dominix or Armageddon, which has the same drone bay. You got a flight of Hobgoblin, you got a flight of light, medium, and heavy drones. Then I have a flight of sentries, and I have a flight of E-War because I need to run away. That's a pretty typical what I'd recommend for any drone boat, unless you were doing something very specific with it. It's a good general flight of drones for killing. You can choose the drones based on what you want to kill. If you're fighting frigates, you launch the hobgoblins. If you're fighting cruisers, you launch the hammerheads, etc., etc. And the highest level newts. The Ishtar, like most drone boats, does not have a gun bonus, so you can put whatever you want in the high slots. Newts, the Amar drones especially use newts, but the Ishtar also does it fairly well, and that means if you can get rid of an enemy's tank, all the better for you. So that's the cruisers. Amakoda asks, how does one use E-War drones to run away? It's fine, and don't worry about missing it the first time. E-War drones basically work just like E-War modules. They're essentially, they jam out the enemy. They're not as strong, but you have 5 of them, so there's a decent chance of them working. So if you're flying through Losec and you've been pointed by a condor, for example, and you're about to die, you could launch a flight of E-War drones and hopefully jam them out. And if you jam them out, they lose point, and you can warp off. And so it's a good thing to have if you have the space in a drone boat, because it just gives you a little extra flexibility as far as not dying, which is always a good thing. Yeah, this is ECM drones specifically, which are the Vespa 600, I believe it's the Wasp, and also the Hornet. Hornet 300, Vespa 600, and Wasps 900, I believe is what it is. Yeah. And they're good for that. So that's the cruisers. Like I said, there's Amar cruisers, but they basically do the same thing except with newts. Questions about the cruisers. And obviously, guys, this class is going to go quite a bit over. But, it's unfortunate. I didn't plan quite as well as I should have, but there's a lot to cover here. I do want to make sure you guys get a good example of all the drone boats. Saber, there is the Proteus, but it's not the drone configuration for besides the fact that it's a T3, the drone configuration for the Proteus is not terribly optimal. I would say the Ishtar is better than a drone Proteus, so I wouldn't do it.
The drone Proteus is the direct counter to the Ishtars.
Like I said, it's a bit advanced for what I consider this class to be. I'm not going to go into the Proteus right now. Maybe if we have time at the end and people want to hear about it. So that's the Ishtar. Do you guys have other questions about the cruisers? Benson asks, would I recommend ECM drones for a scanning frigate? Yes, probably. If you've only got the 2 drone spots, it's not like you're going to be killing things, so 2 light ECM drones might get you out of something. Oh, the Stratios. I forgot about the new ones. Yeah, so the Stratios is the new-ish faction frigate, which is it is the Sisters of Eve faction. It requires Galente and Amar cruisers, and it's got a bonus to drone hit points and damage. If you guys click on the link here that Stokes put, you can see its bonuses. The Estero is the frigate version. The reason I didn't cover these earlier, besides the fact that I forgot, I probably wouldn't have done it anyways, because for right now, these are exceptionally expensive for what they can do. While they do have the drone bonus and the armor resistances, which is nice, I would say that they're not worth the cost at the moment. The Stratios costs at least $1 billion. Last time I checked the market, or very close to $1 billion. I think it was like $800 million.
$300 million is about the average price if you get the right one.
Which is definitely not worth it for any type of cruiser. I'm sorry. I mean, the Ishtar itself costs only about $180, and that's a Tech 2 variant. It's not worth spending the money, in my opinion. I'm going to spend the time talking about other things than those 2.
Yeah, if it's for PvP, the ships that he's discussing are far better equipped than these new ones.
Yeah, it's not that the ships themselves are bad, it's that they're too expensive for what they're worth right now. Yeah, it's just for PvE. You could use them for PvP, for PvE, I suppose, but again, there's just better ships. The Vexor Navy is perfectly capable of doing PvE quite well, and it's still a faction frigate.
Being Sister of Eve, they're mostly geared towards exploration anyway.
Yeah. So that's the cruisers. Let's move on to the battle cruisers, and I will talk about the MR ones in this situation. Like I said, this class is going to go over, but it is what it is. So there are two, not counting the command ships, I'll talk about the EOS as well, but there are two main battle cruiser drone boats. There is the Myrmidon, and there's the Prophecy. The Myrmidon is the Galante version, and the Prophecy is the MR one. And they're used very commonly for mission running, although they're both also very good at PvP. I'm going to pull up my fits for you guys. So I'll start with the Myrmidon first. I'll get two fits. So there are two Myrmidon fits for you. The Myrmidon is the Galante battlecruiser drone boat. It's one of the most used drone ships, along with the Vector Navy issue, for new players. And it's a good ship all around. The Myrmidon, you'll notice, besides the drone bonus, has a excellent bonus for local repairs, which makes it very good for PvE. You can put one or two local reps in medium armor repairs in the low slots, and it can easily tank level 3 and probably level 4 missions. You can also, I've also seen Myrmidons able to tank even C3 sleeper sites and wormholes. So if you're well skilled for it, you can do quite a lot in Myrmidon, despite the fact that it's a Tech 1 ship. The first one I posted is an active armor one, so that's this one is kind of geared towards PvP, but depending on how you fit the mid slots, it could be just as useful for PvE. You'll see the artillery is in the highs. This one's kind of meant for use with sentries. It can field up to 4, which is unfortunately not as much as the Vector Navy or the Ishtar, but it is a Tech 1 ship. It can field up to 4 heavy drones or sentry drones. This one's I'm using with sentries. The armor slot, the low slots are pretty much armor. Typical armor, active armor tank with the ancillary armor repair. Same thing with the rigs. Medium slots, again, you see the omnidirectional tracking link. You see, the rest is pretty typical. The Myrmidon is used, the Prophecy is similar to the Myrmidon, except that instead of the local repair bonus, it gets a bonus to armor resistances. So it's really meant to be more of a buffer tank than a active tank like the Myrmidon is. And it additionally does not have quite as much bandwidth. The Myrmidon has a 100 megabit bandwidth, so it can field up to 4 heavies or sentries. The Prophecy only has 75, so it can field 3 heavies or sentries or most, and is usually used more with medium drones, hammerheads. But they both serve their purposes. The Prophecy can be quite useful in PvP because it has a good buffer, so it can take quite a bit of damage before being destroyed, and it's good for fleet PvP especially. It's rather slow, though. The Prophecy would be used with logistic ships. The Myrmidon can run more by itself, although, you still have to be careful with solo PvP. Both ships, neither ships has a bonus to low slots or, to any type of weapon system besides drones. So you can put whatever you want in the highs. I believe the Prophecy... No, okay, so you can put whatever you want in the highs. That could be newts. Newts are very common on most drone boats. You can also put any type of gun you want, depending on what you have the fitting for. The second Myrmidon fit I posted was similar to that Ishtar fit earlier. It's a shield. It's meant specifically for mission running. It's a passive shield Myrmidon, which is very, very popular for C3 and C4 missions. I'm not going to get too much into how the passive shield works because that's a different class. Somebody asked me to post some more time. Let me do that. I'm not going to get too much into how the passive shield works because that's a different class. But you'll see pretty typical passive shield in the mediums and the lows. The extra slot is just a drone damage amplifier. This Myrmidon was meant to run C3s, or C2s in wormholes. So it has newts in the high slots, and that would work for missions too. It just gives you a little extra capacitor to run things. And it's got the ogres in the lows. Those could also probably be sentries. Questions about so there's also the EOS, which is a command ship. The EOS is a Tech 2 version of the Myrmidon. It is the Galente command ship. If you did not get in before they changed the requirements on the command ship quite a while ago, almost a year ago, which I'm guessing is most of you, the EOS will take an incredibly long time to train into, at least probably 100 days, because it requires you to have all the warfare links. But once you actually get to the EOS, it is an excellent drone boat. It is, in my opinion, the best sub-capital drone boat. I like it actually a lot more than Dominic's because it can field a similar tank. It has almost as big of a drone bay, and it can field the links as well as being quite a bit more maneuverable since it's a battlecruiser and not a battleship. The EOS you would fit probably similar to a Myrmidon, just with fancier Tech 2 modules and faction dead space modules. I'm not going to cover the EOS because that is way beyond the scope of this class. If you can fly an EOS, you should probably know what you're doing at that point. Okay, so that is the battle cruisers. Questions about the battle cruisers? The battle cruisers, by the way, they can be used either brawling with ogres, or they can be used. The Myrmidon at least can be used with sentries to snipe in missions. It kind of depends on what you're doing. But I would, the brawling you would probably want to fit some type of armor tank. The other ones, it can be shield or armor. The Prophecy is pretty much just pure armor. I would not put a shield tank on the Prophecy. Any questions about the battle cruisers? Yeah, is there another class running right now, guys? Well, it's another half hour. Okay, I'll try.
At 3:30 it starts.
Yeah.
Fleet 101.
I'll close things up and then within the next 20 minutes. And like I said, went a little over time, but so that's the battle. That's the battle cruisers, and we'll talk about the battleships last. I'm going to skip rears and super carriers because by the time you can fly those, you should again kind of know what you're doing. So the battleship drone boats, there's two of note. The again, there's also the EOS. It's not really a drone boat, despite the fact that it's meant for drones. It's a black ops ship, which is tricky. The Dominic's is one of the favorite nullsec ships right now. It's used kind of as a Archon light. The Archon is the one of the most popular carriers. The Dominic's is it's a great ship, especially for level 4 missions. It has the drone bonus, the drone hit points and damage bonus, and it has the optimal range tracking speed bonus, just like the Ishtar. It has a 375-meter drone bay, so it can field the same flight of drones that I showed you in the Ishtar earlier, as well as the 125 megabits bandwidth to field a full flight of sentry or heavy drones. I have Dominic's fit somewhere. Okay, there's an example of what is pretty much a mission-running Dominic's. This one is. The low slots is big armor tank, plus the drone damage amplifiers. The rigs, armor rigs, drones, pretty much the same. This one is meant to be mission-running, so it has a second flight of sentries instead of ogres. The high slots is artillery, or railguns in this case, because you want the long range. So what you would do with a Dominic's like this, notice it has a large micro jump drive, which for those of you who don't know, when you turn it on, there's a slight delay, and then it propels your ship 100 kilometers in whatever direction you were traveling when you turned it on. So this is for mission running. What you would do is you would warp into a pocket, and depending on how close you were to the NPCs, you would either drop sentries and start shooting for a while, or you would use the micro jump drive to jump into a direction far away from the NPCs and drop sentries there. And you just keep doing that until everything's dead. Because you're far away, they can't damage you, but your sentries are really effective. So you shoot. Once they get too close, you use the micro jump drive again, and you rinse and repeat. It's really good for running level 4 missions. It can be used as a PvP tactic as well, but you need somebody to tackle because you're far away from things. So that's that. That's a PvP Dominix. That's a mission Dominix, I'm sorry. And I have another fit here. Yeah, I don't like the other one. Let me talk about the Armageddon too, because I have an Armageddon that you would use in pretty much the same fit for PvP. So that's the Dominix. The Armageddon is not quite as much of a drone boat as the Dominix is, in that the Dominix is geared pretty much towards massive DPS with drones. The Armageddon, on the other hand, you'll notice, has a lot of bonuses for newts. The Armageddon is primarily a newt boat that has drones. When you fit an Armageddon, and let me give you an example. Here is a Armageddon. Let me make sure this is the... Guys, I appreciate the help, but please stop posting fits. I haven't looked at them, so I can't guarantee if they're good or not. So you'll notice I posted an Armageddon there, a Newt Geddon. That's a pretty typical example of a PvP Armageddon. And this is meant for newting, right? This is essentially what it's most used for is capital killing. If you've been on the Dragon Slayer fleets with Gareth, so there was a lot of Armageddons that helped to newt out things like carriers, that their reps fail and everything dies. Although, of course, you could use it just as effectively on things smaller than carriers. The high slots are primarily, or all newts, as you can see. The medium slots, you've got a micro warp drive to move around. You have the cap boosters because newts are very cap heavy. And you could have either the ECCM radar, which increases your sensor strength and makes you harder to jam out, or you could have a ship sensor, so that you could tell how much cap the enemy has. Typically, if there's a sensor. The low slot is, again, pretty typical armor tank. Pretty typical rigs. It has the same drones as the Dominix. They're just not as bonus they're just not bonus for tracking range or speed. And you'll notice, it's not going to put out quite as much effective DPS, but it's, even with the newts, it can still put out quite a bit. And that's about how you would, the fitting for the Dominix is going to be the same for the low slots, and then if you were going to change it from a mission running boat to a PvP boat, you would either put, if you're doing solo PvP, you could switch out the 2 plates on that Dominix fit for armor repairers and switch the rigs for the nano pump rigs. Or you could, if you're buffer taking it, if you're in a fleet, the only difference would be the mid slots. You probably would not have a micro jump drive. You probably just have some type of micro warp drive or afterburner. Yep, I'm going to. So that's the drone boats. Let me spend 5 more minutes talking about tactics, and you guys can get to the next class. I'll keep it pretty quick. So, a couple things you need to keep in mind when you're using drones. The first is that one of your primary weaknesses as a drone user is that drones can be destroyed. And so you have to either learn to you have to be able to deal with that. Unlike drones are powerful in that they're versatile, but because they can be destroyed, you have to take care of that. Otherwise, your ship gets handicapped. The 2 ways you can deal with that are if you have a big enough drone bay. So if you're in something like a Dominix or an Ishtar, you can just not care. If you're fighting somebody, and they're attacking your drones, if you can put out enough DPS, or if you could just keep replacing the drones until they die, that's one viable option, right? Like, for example, I was fighting a Demos the other day, and I was using ogres, and he was destroying my ogres, but I was putting out so much DPS that he only got through 2 of my ogres that I easily replaced from my drone bay before he died. So that's one option to keep in mind. And the other option is if you don't have that capability of continually replacing drones, you can, if you're next to your drones, you can pull them in and relaunch them, which breaks the target lock on your drones. If they've locked up your drones and they're shooting them, and you're right next to them, you can just recall them to your drone bay, and then immediately relaunch them, and they've lost target. They have to lock them up again to continue shooting them. This does decrease your DPS, but it also means they're not shooting you. If they're constantly shooting your drones, it's the other option for protecting your drones. I just feel bad because I don't have enough time to really go over this. It's completely my fault, guys. I apologize. But yeah, just keep those two things in mind. There are other things about, you can, if you have to change targets quickly, you can abandon your drones, launch a new flight, and reconnect to your other drones later. It's things like that. I'm just going to take questions. I know there's another class some of you guys want to get to, so I'm just going to take questions for the next 10 or 15 minutes. And we'll leave it at that for today. I'll hold another class, hopefully a little better organized in about a month, if you guys want a little more on that. Yeah, I'm not going to go over the Archon Saber because it's a little bit beyond the scope of this class. I may end up splitting the class into yeah. I'm probably next time I teach this class I'll split it into 3 classes because it took a lot longer than I did last time. So. That may be the best way to do it. Benson asks, is there ever a time that you would recommend having 2 types of drone out at once? Yes, it's not something that you would typically do, like if you're in an Ishtar or Domix, but there are some ships where you, like the Algos, the Destroyer, for example, was a good example of where you would mix hammerheads and hobgoblins, the medium and light drones, to maximize your DPS. You can't feel the full flight of hammerheads because you don't have the bandwidth for it. But you have enough to launch 2 hammerheads and 3 hobgoblins, which means you have a bit higher DPS than if you just launch one or the other. And so that's a case where you would mix it. Not so much about like mixing hobgoblins and warriors. That doesn't make as much sense. Other questions? You guys can just talk and mumble now, or you can ask and get in lecture. Let me also post a forum link for you guys, so please go ahead and comment there. I know this class wasn't quite as smooth as the last one, and my apologies for that, but let me post it so you guys can leave me any comments, criticisms, what you liked about that class, and then I'll just be here for questions as long as you guys want. Yep, that's the forum link. Like I said, I'll schedule more time for the next class. Next time I teach this class, you guys want to come back, at least for Drones 102. But yeah, I'm just open for questions. Go ahead and throw them at me, whatever you want. And thank you for showing up, guys. I hope it was helpful, even though it was a little rushed this time around.
Yeah, you missed the Gila.
Yeah, I know. I thought about going over that one. Yeah.
That's all right. It's pretty much the same as an Ishtar
yeah,
now.
That was it. If you guys are interested, the Gila or the Gila, it's a faction frigate. It's a shield drone boat essentially, and you fit it pretty much exactly the same as the Ishtar. I would still fly an Ishtar. I think it's a bit better, but it is a good kind of in between ship, or if you're looking specifically for a shield ship. Remus, you wanted the Dominics. Okay, yeah, let me post that again. So that's the Dominics I posted earlier, Remus. It's meant mainly for mission running, that particular one. I have another fit, but I do have another Dominics fit saved, but I don't like it as much, to be honest. I'll just post it anyways. This is another one. It's meant more for PvP. I made it a while ago. There are some changes I would make to it now. The main thing being I wouldn't necessarily have the things like the web and the scram in the mid slot. Most of the time you're using a Dominix, you're going to be in a fleet. PvP, you're going to be in a fleet, which means you have people to tackle. I'd probably use the mid slots for other things like cap boosters. You'll notice there's still newts in the high slots, even though it's not an Armageddon, because really you can't go wrong with a Newton Dominant. I'd probably take out the other two things. When I made this Dominix, it was mainly meant for wormhole use. So that's why you see the cloaking device and the probe launcher, but you could replace those with newts and then put some type of cap modules maybe in the mid slots or omnidirectionals. Probably what I put instead of the disruptor and the web. I'd put omnidirectionals. Other questions, guys?
Christ, I just had one.
Benson, yes, newting drone boats are really powerful. In fact, it's one of the most common uses of drone boats is using the newts in the high slots. And there are several drone boats. The Amar drone boats a lot of them are specifically made to use with newts. There's also one I did forget to mention that I should have, which is the Curse. The Curse is I believe it's a Force Recon cruiser. It's an Amar cruiser that has a really good bonus to newting that is used in a lot of solo PvP. The big problem with the Curse is that good. But the Curse, the Armageddon, even something like the Prophecy or the Ishtar, they're not bonus for newts, but you can still put newts on them. It's really powerful because even though you can't necessarily break their tank with just your drones tend to have a little bit lower DPS on paper than turrets, especially because you can usually only have 5 of them, whereas some ships may have 7 or 8 turret points. If you have those high slots free to either put in more DPS through turrets or through newts, and if you can newt them out, you can kill them.
Actually, one of the very best boats is the Pilgrim. I just linked the fit there.
Yep. Other questions? Well, I'll hang around for about 10, 15 minutes, guys. I'll just hang around this channel if anything comes up. You want to ask a question, feel free. Just bubble, lecture, wherever. If not, thank you for coming, and we'll just call the class over. I'll try and hold it again in about a month with more time scheduled for it. And hopefully a little better organized for the second part.
Just a question, though, on how do you record it? Is that a way of doing that?